Kick it off.
I'll start it. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Think Tank. Each day we share the news and open dialogue and discuss how it might affect the business world. We speak with different leaders on crisis navigation and management, as well as experts in professional and personal self-betterment. It's meant to be a break and some learning, sharing of good news and ideas to start people moving forward. It's called the Think Tank. Today, we are privileged to have Dane Dunstan with us, who will learn a little bit more about him and what he's doing. And he's going to give us some great tips on how we can lead from home, which we haven't had a choice. It's what we have to do now. But I'd like to go around the campfire, if you will, and just kind of say hi to everyone and let everyone know who's there. There's Kimball Anderson, creative producer, who takes Dane's messaging and focusing and structure and make sure execs look amazing and can present coherently on stage with all sorts of creative production. There's Robbie Sawyer from Thinker Society. He helps people and corporations get to their better ideas faster with unique experiences, engagement, and education. There is T. Scott Anderson, photographer, videographer, sports enthusiast who captures all sorts of different sporting events in reality TV around the world. Next to him is Mike Toman, another photographer who captures all sorts of documentary, advertising, as well as event sort of imagery. There is Michael Simpson, and here we go, Michael. Michael is the lead technologist for a telemedicine company where he helps connect doctors and physicians with their patients remotely. They've gone completely online in the last month or two with that solution. So that's really interesting when he chimes in with some thoughts about how that's working. Dr. Paulus, psychologist, professor extraordinaire of all sorts of different levels within academia, but he is a specialist in collaborative innovation and creativity, helping people understand what that is and how to tap into that. And then finally is Doug Carroll. Doug is a CEO and boardroom advisor. He helps big brands, Apple and Disney and AT&T, during times of crisis, stop and take a breath, understand what's going on, put together a plan, and go execute it. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We got a handful of people on YouTube. If you'd like to comment or ask a question, please do so. I'll try and stay on top of that. At this time, we normally jump into the news. Any news of any sort that anyone would like to share? Anyone?
What's the word? We're looking forward to tomorrow. Friday is the first restrictions, some restrictions lifted. Don't know anything new on that unless anybody else does.
Did you guys see the benchmarks they put out for Disney and Universal to open in Florida?
No.
Yeah, late yesterday, the governor, there was a specific committee that included the chairman of the Orlando Magic and some Disney folks, but they said that they didn't give a time frame, but they said phase one would be taped and roped off areas, all employees in masks and gloves, hands-free sanitizer at every entry and exit point, regular cleanings of all touch points, and initially maximum 50% of occupancy would be allowed.
I saw Como today at lunch, and he was talking about how they're, it's all about testing, and then when they find folks doing the tracing backwards and what the crazy math looks like on that. But it was interesting to hear that Bloomberg has jumped in, and he's throwing a lot of resources, I guess, to put the technology together to start tracking backwards to be able to pull all that in so they can incubate those that are infected and at least watch them and see how that goes.
Have you guys heard about the Manhattan Project of COVID-19?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. There's a group of extremely influential and rich people plus a veritable who's of scientists that have come together completely privately and are absurdly well funded to combat COVID-19 on their own. And it's an interesting group. I guess the only way to make it short for this, they're the biologist that won the 2017 Nobel Prize said he was the least prepared and stupidest person in the room.
Wow.
That's great to see.
That gives you a little indication. And apparently they were having some problems getting something from the FDA. And one of the guys said, "Give me 10 minutes." And he walked out, called Pence, and within 8 minutes, the FDA had said, "You're cleared to go."
Wow.
Doug, get his number for me, would you?
Yeah.
Actually, I can probably trace it back because they said who it was.
So we need his help with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen on that.
A little
Well,
closer to home, go ahead.
I was going to say here in Texas, they're talking to some of my restaurant clients today. They're on tomorrow, restaurants can open in Texas at 25% occupancy. Problem is, for most restaurants, you can't break even at 25% occupancy. So a lot of the people I'm talking about aren't opening.
Is that a fire marshal thing? Who's going to regulate that?
No, hey Dane, did you hear the interview with Ray Washburn this morning?
No.
Ray Washburn, if you don't know, significant restaurateur, not just in Texas, but all over the country, and is a member of Trump's advisory board to help get everyone back on, get the economy going. Yeah. Something Christine was talking about last week, and quite frankly, has been talking about it for a couple of weeks. He was saying that, listen, opening at 25% occupancy, is counterproductive to just about every restaurant out there.
Yeah.
Right.
He's like, listen, we need to wait, and it almost benefits us to wait until we can be 100% occupied.
Because how can you hire employees?
You just can't do it. Yeah. And
Cuban was saying Kimball, the same thing.
Yeah. The other thing, Kimball, that he hit, which is something Christine talked about also last week, is a good majority of his company of 1,800 employees are under $100,000 a year, right? They're front of the house, back of the house type employees. Because they're now getting this $600 unemployment.
Right. There's no incentive to not take unemployment.
Yeah. Yeah. So what they're advising or trying to advise the council on is, instead of making it just flat until the end of July, that's what we're going to offer. They need to do it weekly, bi-weekly, until we understand exactly how we're going to get ramped up and get going again. Because right now, it's very difficult to get people. And like he said, you don't blame them. Same thing Christine said. You don't blame them. They're making way more money on unemployment than they would if they came back to their job.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Crazy.
Well, let's jump into it. I'd like to welcome everyone with my beautiful slide, Dane Dunstan. Dane is a writer and executive coach, and here's a great story to start with, because that's what Dane is really all about, is great stories and helping people find theirs. But Dane was a struggling freelance writer in his mid-30s when he wrote a magazine article about Chevrolet's brand problems and how to solve them. In other words, build better cars. The magazine didn't even send him a rejection letter, but 3 months later, he gets a phone call from the GM saying they made the article required reading for the C-suite. And could he come to Detroit and help them figure out how to spark a quality revolution in their culture? That turned into a long career helping leaders of Fortune 500 companies with speeches, and then even with speech coaching. And that evolved into executive coaching and his company, Reservoir, Deep Resources for Leaders. So thank you, Dane, for joining us. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Woohoo.
So Dane,
I love that. You only get that lucky once. You have to be able to stick the landing when you get lucky.
And obviously you did.
I did.
So Dane, before COVID happened, what was your day to day? What kept Dane busy? What does Dane do?
You know what's? I sat right here in this spot and talked to people on Zoom. So
about really?
about 3 years ago, we switched over from in-person coaching to Zoom because it made a lot of sense. And I objected at first. I said, look, I got to be in the room with somebody. I got to be able to read their body language and really just have that kinesthetic sense of when somebody's how they're responding to what we're talking about. But it turns out you really can get that via these calls. And so all of my coaching now is via Zoom. And if I'm not on a coaching call, I'm writing. So I hear there's something going on out there. I live in Wimberley. Nobody's told me what it is.
That's funny. We were speaking with another leader coach the other day, and they were reticent to jump online like this, and they were all about the touchy-feely and how does that look and feel, and can we have a little bit of a kumbaya? And he said the same thing, is that he was actually able to probably break down and get into more meaningful conversation when you do have this digital divide between you.
Yeah, it really is. Somebody was talking today about, we're talking to a friend who's writing a book on sales. And one of the questions that's coming up is face-to-face selling done? And his response was, this is face-to-face. It's a different kind of face-to-face, but in a lot of ways, this can actually be more intimate and more connected than being in a room with somebody. There's a lot of distractions, there's things going on. This is very real.
Very good. So your model and what you do didn't really change much with this. You probably had people with more time to talk to you.
Yeah, I go out to dinner less. The other thing that's real, I don't know, probably everybody is doing this, is we started having Zoom cocktails with friends. Yeah. And Gene and I the first one we did was with a couple that we're really, really close with. They live in Louisville, really good friends. Kimball knows Mac Dryden. Comic who's been around for years, does a lot of stuff. He's now does phenomenal sculpture and art, and his wife's a famous painter. And so we started hanging out. We realized we hadn't actually been together for 3 years. So now we're having cocktails every week, like they live next door, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got family in Europe, and I never see them or talk to them. Maybe a Facebook post, but yeah, we're doing at least once a week talks now, which we never would have done. So it's amazing how it's actually bridged people together, as opposed to really separated them. Hey, well, let's.
Dane, with your coaching, is it one-on-one or is it like this in a group setting?
It's one-on-one. I do webinars with clients, and we'll have a groups of clients that get together for a webinar like this. But the coaching is one-on-one. And let me give you the economics on it, because this is really interesting. I used to charge my clients, between $2,000 and $4,000 a day, right? So that's great. Except for the Tuesday meeting, I got to fly in on Monday. After the Tuesday meeting, probably have dinner with a client, and then I fly home on Wednesday. So it's 3 days. This, I charge $500 for an hour, and do the math. It's just so much better. It's so much easier.
Very good. Well, let's jump into our program today. And this was interesting. I was asking if you had any sort of program, if you will, or guidelines or presentation that you could do with this. And you came up with a great one that you've been doing, I guess, leading from home. And that's something we all kind of need some tips on how to do that, both, I guess, not only with employees, but it maybe even customers or whoever it may be. So, that's really good. This was intended for employers, and it came out of a conversation with somebody who runs a trading office. So he's got all these, or not a trading office, a creative office. And he's got basically a whole floor of a building, and he knows where every department is. And now he's stuck at home and he has no visibility. What are people doing? So this came out of that conversation with him. And this was an article that we ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on Monday. But 8 things. Number 1, reset your mindset. So everything that we do in our life is about our state of mind and our perception. So if we're sitting at home saying this doesn't work, then what are the odds of it working? Pretty low. If you're sitting at home saying, I can make this work, I can do this, then you improve your chances of success a lot. And then once you're resetting your mindset, you understand that your job is to help everybody reset their mindsets.
it really is just a psychological way of the way we approach this. If we weren't going through all the other stuff that was going on with this, and this was becoming the norm, we'd all be real comfortable with it. But it gets worrisome. And I'll talk a couple of things around that, why it does. The next thing is, one of the reasons that the mindset gets all messed up is that the game has changed. And for the guy we were talking with, he's used to, walking around this floor. He's got all the creative people. He's got the account executives. He's got the graphics department, all the techie people doing stuff with social media, the writers and all of this. He knows where everybody is, and he can walk around that and he can see it. And he says, where's the program? And he's sort of like a quarterback. He can call the plays, and he's there with everybody. But when this gets going, it's a different game. And suddenly he's on a soccer field, and the guy with the ball is all the way across the thing, and he can't even hear me yelling. And so you got to trust that guy with the ball knows where the goal is and is accountable for getting it through the uprights. It just changes the game. But so you have to know that the game has changed, and it really is important to do that. The third thing is, you got to really model right behavior. We are social animals. We follow social cues. And when we don't know what to do in a situation, we'll look around at the people around us. But if you're stuck home, the people around you are 4 years old, right? So that's not going to help you. So you got to be showing up for people, whether that's sending them text messages, sending emails out. If it helps to send funny emails out, do it. If you're doing a meeting or a conference call like this, you want to be really clear about what you're doing. And something really critical is you got to be really thoughtful about what's behind you in your room. I was working with the CEO of a major bank, and we're doing a thing out for all of his people that was going to be pre-recorded, and it just, here's what we're doing. We're all at home. We're doing this. And for fun, he wanted to show his dog. So he shows me the video of the dog. Here's the thing. The dog was a breed I'd never heard of that was some kind of extraordinarily fancy poodle, probably cost about $5,000. It was too expensive to actually be a poodle. And then behind the dog was this massive marble fireplace and this enormous mansion where he lived. And I just had to say, a lot of the employees who are going to be on this live in studio apartments, and probably even more of them are right now living in their parents' basement. You don't want to be showing this. So we got a really nice sort of blank background where people could see it. And then it was courageous. If you haven't seen Jacinda Ardern's video, she's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Have you guys seen that?
No.
This is incredible. This is the video that a video of the webcast that she did after they announced shelter in place in New Zealand. So they sent out on everybody's phone, they sent out a warning, like when we get a storm warning or flood warning, and so the big horns. So when the webcast opens up, and you can get this is online, she's sitting on her couch in her living room wearing a sweatshirt. She's not at the desk in the president's or the prime minister's palace with the flags on either side, reading and now as we gather together.
Yeah.
She's talking and she said, I'm really sorry. First of all, I'm just really sorry about that horn that went off on your phone. I know how disturbing that was. And she talks about why they decided to do it that way. And she said, hey, I'm sorry, forgive me for dressing so casually, but I just had to put my toddler down. The genius of what she did was she modeled how to act and think for everyone in the country, because everybody else was sitting on the couch in their hoodie and saying what's going on and feeling uncomfortable. She had on the screen in front of her questions live coming from people on the comments thing. She was picking those out and going, oh, hey, Kimball, no, don't worry. Your visa, it's going to be okay. I know you're not going to have to leave the country. You're going to be fine. We're going to extend all visas. And Robbie, with the payment, those of you who have waiting for checks, those are going to come through. They're all going to be on time. So any concern that anybody was out there and expressing, she was modeling how to deal with that. So with your employees or your team or whoever you're working with, just making sure that you're coming from their point of view, you're showing yourself in their situation. It's going to make all the difference.
Makes sense.
Well,
Kind of
and how
level
relatable
set
is
down
it?
to a common denominator with everybody.
Michael had a.
I was just going to say, how relatable is that? I'm sorry I look like this. I just had to put my toddler down. I literally just changed the angle of my computer so that I'm not looking away from my house. I'm looking toward my door to see if one of my children is going to come looking for me in a moment.
Yeah.
We're all in that. We're all in that space right now. That's
we are
very relatable.
And we got to be real about it. And look, you know, most everybody on the call is comfortable with just wearing a t-shirt. If I'd known, I should just, you know, but we got to model that. The other thing is really getting personal, particularly if you're a leader and you got your people going, you got to take the personal time. You just can't go in and start barking orders and we got to do this and here's where our call is. You got to just give people a little time to share because they're not getting what used to be called water cooler time and will never be called that again, I don't think. It is personal. When you think about what we're doing here, we've got to understand that the most important thing is people. And that goes back to the next thing, which is lead what matters most. We as human beings will tend to get into real trivia. Our psychological models go that way, and we'll get into the trivia things, deadlines. What matters most is people. The one thing I think I know that I can state as a scientific fact is that we can survive a recession, we can survive a depression, we probably can survive a complete meltdown of the entire global economy. But nobody yet has any proof that you can survive dying. So, you know, that's what people are sitting there worried about. They're worried about all these things, but we got to bring it back to what matters most. So what matters most is people. What matters most is people knowing about what's happening. If there's going to be furloughs, we're sort of past that part of this. But if there's going to be furloughs, then you got to be honest that there's going to be furloughs. And as soon as we know who it's going to be, we're going to be with you. And then here's what we're going to do. Here's why it's furloughs, because furloughs means you still have your benefits and you can come back and all of this. It's not being fired, it's not being laid off. Then as we go through it, we'll let you know when we can get you back as quickly as possible. If I'm sitting at home and I know that this can happen, okay, I can live with that because you're talking to me, you're helping me lead what matters most. And then the other thing that you're leading then is leading out of it, which is being able to say, here we are at the 1st of May now. We're thinking that by mid-June, we're going to start to see the uptick as clients coming back. We're already at the point where clients are willing to talk about new projects and new ideas, where it's not weird to be calling them and saying, hey, we've got a new program here. We're ready to go there. So get people focused on moving forward. That helps everybody's psychological mindset. The other one that was interesting, because with this guy that we were talking with, and his office, he has a mental map of the entire floor. He knows mentally where every group is, every person, and inside that map, it allows him to attach deadlines, projects, everything that's going on in there. His mind is making that up. He can see it. So it makes it real easy for him to walk around and know what's going on. Sitting at his kitchen table, he can't see any of that. So what we suggested is mapping. And there's a lot of ways to do mapping. The Greeks used to do this a lot. They called it a memory palace. And you created in your mind a memory palace of where everything was. The easiest way I think to do it is take a piece of paper, draw a little map of that floor of your office. Or if you're running 10 restaurants, draw a little map and there's a picture of each restaurant. And I say draw, you could do it on a map, or you could do it on PowerPoint, you could be digital. I said this to somebody and they thought I was being kind of old school, but here's the thing. Cognitively, when we draw something with our hand, it actually creates a stronger map than if we did it on PowerPoint. And then what you've done is you've created a map, a mind map. You can follow all of a sudden. Suddenly you can see, oh yeah, over in the corner, those guys are working on the project for UPS. And let me just see how that's going, because now I remember that's due on Thursday. Let me get that going. So mapping is huge. Kimball and I have done a lot of work with speakers. A lot of the speakers we use have very complicated speeches when they come to us. A couple of years ago, I had a very complicated speech. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was just like too many stories, too many people throwing stories at me. I was up in Santa Fe. So I went out and I pulled out of the trash, or not out of the trash, but I pulled out a brown paper not garbage bag, grocery bag. And I just started drawing all the bits. There's this story about this and this, and we want to talk about this. And pretty soon I had it all laid out. I was able to draw arrows and made a map out of it. And suddenly I had a speech because I could map it. These days, if I give a speech of my own, what I will do is I'll write the speech, or I'll at least outline it, or I'll block it out of the stories. Then I'll literally will draw a map of the speech. And the first time I did this, I was just about to get up. It was at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And I sort of snuck the map out on the table and looked at it. And I went, oh, I am so screwed. I have no idea what any of this means. But when I stood up, I put it on the podium, walked in front of the podium, and I started talking. And the whole map was there. I finished it in 29 minutes and 30 seconds, exactly on time, because the map was. That's a really powerful trick for any of us who are trying to keep a lot of things in our mind, map it out.
There's a great podcast about memory mapping on
really?
On Hidden Brain. I'll find it while you're talking and post it here. It's a great thing to sit there and listen. It is fascinating how it works.
I'll tell you, it's changed my work. I mean, the stuff that I can knock out real fast. This article that we're talking about right now, when we first started talking about it, I sat down and mapped it out with 4 boxes. Then some other things came up and mapped it out again with 8 boxes with a little picture of a worried guy sitting at his table. And it all just comes like that. The seventh thing that we had in the article was create gatherings. People like to get together. The companies that I've been talking to who were most successful getting through this in the last 6 weeks started right at the beginning with every morning a leadership meeting. So everybody knew what really counted and what was important. And then every afternoon at 4 o'clock, they had an all hands webinar. And they have like about 100 employees. Everybody in the company could shut everything down and get on. And the leader of the company, just like the Prime Minister of New Zealand, would say, okay, here's what we're going through. Here's what we know today. Here's what's happening. Here's what we think is going to happen tomorrow. Here's what we want you to understand. And people loved it. And about 4 weeks in, they started noticing that fewer and fewer people were getting on that late afternoon call. And the reason was they were comfortable. They didn't need to be reinsured anymore because they knew they were being communicated with, and they felt the sense of the company, of everybody there. And then finally, the thing is recognize accomplishments. And sometimes that's individual accomplishments. If one of those teams has done something good, or somebody did something, somebody brought a sale in or something, that's great. But even more, people need to know that they appreciate you. Telling them the accomplishments of the whole group is really good. Letting them all know that all together, we're really accomplishing something here. As bad as this could have been, look where we are. We've done some good stuff together. Now, the question is then moving forward, what you got to do is every morning reset your mindset and just be ready to go for the next thing. As we come out of the lockdown part of this, a lot of the stuff is going to stay the same. A lot of people are going to be working remotely. We're going to realize that works really well. We got to connect with them the same way that we're doing right now.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny how all these discussions we have kind of lead to the same sort of thing about getting yourself prepared and putting together some better practices. And then look how that's going to live beyond COVID.
Yeah. We either reset our own mindsets or we're flailing around. And that's every one of ours responsibility to basically be able to just, look what's ahead of you and say, okay, I can do this. I can make this happen. And then you go do it. You're more likely to win than fail.
Very good. Any questions from the Peanut Gallery?
What's happened to the value of the handshake?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know I would love to hear what anybody else thinks. that's so human. And that goes back so far. I don't see us changing that. I mean, I think what's happened to the value of washing your hands is a more important question. But because before this happened, less than 50% of men would wash their hands in a public restroom unless somebody else was in the restroom to see them not doing it. Then we would wash our hands. Now, I'm washing my hands 10 times a day and I'm only the one at home. I mean, if that changes, the flu virus is way down this season because everybody's washing their hands. We keep that up, we can shake hands together.
Hey, Dane, in thinking about the value of the webinar and how handy it's become and how it's sticking, we do like it.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, what about gatherings? What about, do you see a return to that corporate event that you and I were so familiar with? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're going to get through this. Gilead Science with their remdesivir is looking pretty good. People are, the cases are showing that people are getting cured in 4 days. It's 5 days. It's almost like a Z-Pack for the flu. We're going to have the Oxford group's got this vaccine coming out. If that's the real deal, that vaccine could be out as early as fall. And then we'll be through this and we'll be better at it. And we'll know how to do it better. And it may take till the end of next year before we're actually safe enough to do that. And enough people have been vaccinated. And then there's going to be another one of these. These aren't going to stop and slow down. This isn't a once in a lifetime thing as it's being made out to be. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that's come out in a lot of conversations that I think is really interesting, I had a client who was working from home. He was a junior leader in a company, but high up enough. He said, I feel like I'm in a different time. I feel like I got into a time machine. The neighborhood I live in, people are walking outside. There's no cars going by. It's very simple. Everything feels like I'm back in the 1930s or something. And as we talked about it, we realized that what we're going through, the human race has never gone through before. There's never been a time in the history of all human species when every human society on Earth is going through the same thing, aware that everybody else is going through it, and basically having the same experience. Individuals are having different experiences. My experience is probably a little bit different from Elon Musk's, for instance, but we're still going through it. And we all know that, and that's never happened in human history. It's kind of profound.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, or shall I start the lightning round with Dane?
No. There's one question.
Oh, okay.
Being the psychologist, your background is supposedly meaningful. You've got the stack of books. It looks pretty shaky. Looks like it may fall any time.
Oh, no, that's just the angle. This is solid. It's
solid. I see.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's a steel rack of books made in Italy.
And that's his weekend reading. He's got to get on that.
Oh wow, interesting. Yeah, because again, people say how you have your office and desk means something about you. There's a guy at UT Austin who can analyze your personality from your room or your refrigerator. And so I'm trying to analyze your personality right now, except I don't do that. It's your book, not obviously.
Yeah. Dane, how many books have you written?
I'm in the middle of number 4, and number 5 is about halfway written.
Do you have any right there you can hold up so everyone can see and go know to look for and go read?
That's a great
one.
Yep. And the nano story, I think that's another good one, Dane.
Yeah.
Where's that? Is that
Nanovation?
Nanovation. Yeah. The synopsis of that, I mean, it's fascinating. I'll have to ask him to. Yeah,
I like this one. This is the Korean edition of it.
the
Nanovation.
Big backstory on that, Dane.
Well, I got asked by Kevin and Jackie Freiberg out in San Diego, who've written a ton of books, that if I would help them with this. It was about this little car in 2008 that they were building in India. Tata Motors wanted to build a car that would get Indian families off of motor scooters. You've all seen the pictures with, like, you know, mom, dad, and 3 kids on a motor scooter going through traffic. The chairman of Tata had always thought they ought to do something about it. And one day he was in traffic. It was raining. He was behind a family on a scooter, and they wiped out. And so he makes his driver stop, and he gets out and he helps the family up, and he got back in the car and said, that's it, we got to do something. So the goal was to make a 6-passenger car for the price of a scooter. And they did it. The downside is that the Indian people, while they were very excited while it was going on, and they really got that the whole world was watching this great thing, when it came to buying it, it was hard to sell, hard to buy, and it never really took off. So there you go. What happened is 2 years writing a book.
Dane, what's another book you're reading right now, or one you've read lately that we should check out?
In 1947, a guy named Albert Camus wrote a book called The Plague.
Yep.
That's a good read right now. It's cheerful, a little light reading. It's actually very light reading in the sense that it's just about what the people were going through. And their plague was a little worse than ours. They had bodies in the street where we so far don't. The other one that somebody just turned me on to last week, and I misunderstood them. I thought it was a World War II thriller. It's Eric Larson's book, The Splendid and the Vile, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's about when Churchill took office, and the first 6 months or so of being the Prime Minister of England. At that point, they were 90 days from the Battle of Britain started. They were completely unprepared as a government or as a military for war, and about half their military was stranded on a beach across the Channel in Dunkirk. And the way they were to pull stuff together so that when the Nazis started bombing, they were blown away. They couldn't understand why they were getting shot down so much. Really interesting for 2 reasons, because what the people in the Battle of Britain were going through, just the ordinary men and women in their apartments trying to live through this, worse than what we're going through, but in many ways similar. And they pulled a lot of things from people's diaries about what they were going through. And then the other thing is what the government was going through and private companies to solve the problem and really get on it. And it was a tremendous leadership thing. Really exciting to read, and particularly right now, it's so relevant.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds like a good one. All right, we're going to start the lightning round here, where I just ask you a bunch of questions and we get a little bit more into your psyche. They're very deep, but you only get 2 seconds to come up with an answer. So are you an early morning or a late night guy?
Is that for me?
Yeah, they're all
really?
For you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Early morning, always up between 5 and 6.
Barbecue or sushi?
Barbecue.
TV, newspaper, or web?
Newspaper. Newspaper on the web.
Yeah, web.
Dog or cat?
Dog.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn?
LinkedIn most of the time. Instagram for my I have a little art following that I do, so I put out photographs.
Beach, mountains, or countryside?
Mountains.
Avocado toast or bagel?
Avocado toast.
Live or on demand?
Live.
And your COVID guilty pleasure is?
Oh, I'm not feeling very guilty about anything. I just walking the dogs.
Very good. Well, any closing words for us today?
Just back to lead what matters most. What matters most is people. Love the people around you. Make sure everybody's getting what they need and reach out. That's what we're here for. In the end, nothing else really matters.
Well, Dane, thanks for being on today. We really appreciate it. I love, obviously, you're a coach and a trainer because you did that very succinctly, better than we all could, I think. So very nice and some great tips.
Dane, where can we find you on Instagram?
That's a really good question. I think it's Dane Dunstan. Let me find out. Because I never looked myself up on Instagram, so what would I know?
Yeah, Dane Dunstan. No.
While we're looking that up, everyone, tomorrow is Friday, and that means that it's Think Tank Happy Hour. We move to 4 o'clock, and we bring our adult beverages. So look forward to seeing you then and there. Thanks again, Dane, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.
Thanks, Dane.